Okay, well, hello. My camera, I thought I had a little bit more of between which camera I wanted to use. Hi, I decided to do a little bit of a live stream here because I'm going to be posting a podcast that I just completed. And I wanted to talk a little bit more. So I just got through interviewing Valerie Lusvati, and she is a personal trainer and she does a lot of online training. And so we talked about the pros and the cons of using a physical trainer, a personal trainer that is online. And I thought that was very fascinating because I always felt like I had to have a live person standing next to me as a trainer. I wanted someone that was there to correct my form or tell me that my knee needed to go in a little bit or my back needed to be a little bit more straight or something like that. So I didn't understand how you could use an online trainer, but Valerie explained it very well. And one of my favorite people that I follow on Instagram, her trainer actually lives in the UK. So, I mean, how much more online can you get, right? So, I'm really curious to see how many of you have contemplated getting a personal trainer. You've decided you want to get into shape, you want to start lifting weights, but you're really conflicted with how do I find a personal trainer? Do I work with someone online and how does that work? And Valerie explained it really, really well. So, the other thing that we talked about was nutrition and we talked about lifting heavy. And I know that there's a lot of people in my demographic, 60 and above. We grew up with more aerobic. We grew up with Jane Fonda. We grew up with the idea that running was the way to lose weight. And many of us started when the jogging craze started in the 80s. That's what a lot of us used as ways of maintaining our health and our weight. We also got into the classes. So we liked classes and jazzercise and all of these programs, all of these community services that were set up were very aerobic because that's what we were focused on in the 80s and the 90s. And well, hello. Okay. Anyway, so in my demographic, women that are my age, most of us don't understand why you would need to do weight training. And so Valerie explains it very well. And one of the things that I've really learned is I remember when I was really running a lot. It was right after I had my fifth baby, and I remember standing at my kitchen table and or not at the kitchen sink, and there was a window right above the kitchen sink, and I saw this woman jog by, and she was one of my neighbors, and she was kind of a big woman, and I remember thinking, well, if she can do it, I can do it. And so I bought a Walkman. That's how long ago it was. And I decided I was going to start running. And it took me a month to get up to a mile. It took me a month to work up to being able to run a mile. And then the next month I ran 2 miles. The next month I ran three. And the next month I ran four. And then I started doing like a 5K. And so that's a little, 3 miles. And I did that 6 days a week. I ran 6 days a week. And then I added step classes. I would go over to the local gym and I would do the step class, which is also aerobic. And I did lose weight, but I didn't change my body. I just got thinner. And it was very interesting because at that time in the 80s, that's all we wanted, right? We just wanted to be thinner. And so it worked, and running was the cool thing to do. And then I remember when Susan Powder came on. Do you remember Susan Powder? She had this cool little spiked haircut, and she talked about carbs and fat. She talked about fat. Like you could eat anything you wanted as long as it didn't have fat in it. So I remember I had girlfriends that were eating like an entire loaf of bread or candy. They had a purse full of candy because it didn't have fat in it. And I remember jogging one day and I was thinking, that just doesn't make sense. I mean, it doesn't make sense that you could eat a whole loaf of bread and it didn't matter because it didn't have fat. So I remember even in those days, I could look at these things that were popular or things that were very much in the news and kind of use my critical thinking skills to say, you know what, that just doesn't make very good sense. And so running kind of became my thing. And it wasn't until about, I would say maybe 9 or 10 years ago that I decided to start doing, strength training. And one of the best things was when COVID hit and everything closed down, I actually had dumbbells and a bench at my home. And so I found an app that I used on my phone, and I started using that app every single day. And that is really how I started seeing progress. I started going from a 5 pound to a 10 pound, and then it progressively got heavier and heavier. And I really could see my body change. Now, one of the things, the advantage that I had was, my youngest son was severely disabled, and he was completely dependent on a wheelchair. He could do nothing for himself. So I had to lift him. And so I would lift him out of bed and I would put him in his bath chair and I would bathe him, and then I would lift him back out and I would, put him in on his bed and get him dressed, and then I would lift him back and put him in his wheelchair. And I did that his whole entire life. I bathed him every day. I would pick him up, and as he got heavier and heavier as he aged, I would pick him up out of the car and I would put him in his wheelchair. And I would pick up his wheelchair and I would put it in the car. And so I was able to kind of build my biceps up, just because I had a child that became an adult that I had to care for. And so I always had some pretty good biceps. And so that kind of just came from the natural job that I had as a caregiver in the home. But to be able to build abs, I've never had abs before. I was not involved in any athletics as a child. I didn't. My whole family, none of us were athletic in my family. My mother divorced my biological father when I was 7, and she remarried a beautiful man from England. And so he did not understand this whole football thing. So neither one of my brothers played football. No one played baseball. When my stepfather was in school, he was in a boarding school and he played cricket. So the whole idea that young boys should be involved in sports just didn't happen. So neither one of my brothers were athletic at all. And of course, as a woman, I didn't get into any kind of athletics. So it wasn't until I was in my very early 30s that I started running and started doing things that were physically active. So weight training has been a new experience for me, and it's taken a while to kind of build up my base. And I think that's very interesting. Women and a lot of the programs that are out there really encourage fast results. Like they'll offer you a 6-week program or a 12-week program, and they'll show you, the 90-day difference between what can happen in 3 months. And if you have a lot of body fat to lose and you really start a program, if you've never been active in your life and you start a program, you will probably see a big change in 90 days. But if you have been semi-active, like a friend of mine who was a marathon runner, there you don't see a lot of really big change in 90 days. So anyway, it's very interesting. So I just wanted to step on here really quick and give you a heads up that I'm going to be posting my interview with Valerie later this evening. She became visible 513 on YouTube. And so I really encourage you to watch and to listen and to participate. Go ahead and comment, and I'll get back to anybody that has any questions. So I hope you have a great day. Find some time to go outside, enjoy the sunshine. From what I see of the morning news, there's a lot of sunshine out there. The entire West Coast looked pretty beautiful. So go outside and find some vitamin D and have a great day. Bye bye.